Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November webinar. My name is Sam Zuber, and I'm the chair of the Professional Development Committee. I want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. I'd like to introduce Valerie Moore. She is the Instruction and Engagement Librarian at Prairie State College. Her topic today is library outreach during COVID-19. With that, I'll leave it to Valerie. Take away, Valerie.
Thank you so much, Sam. And if you have any questions as I present, please feel free to hop on the mic at any time or ask them in the chat. And I'm going to ask Sam to keep an eye on that, just because presenting and watching the chat at the same time is just more than my brain can handle. But what I'm hoping to talk about today is how my library at Prairie State College handled outreach in the form of communications and in the form of events during the 2020 to 2021 school year, or last school year, when we were basically closed as a campus. So before we really get into the weeds, I am curious how you guys are doing your events at present, and if you are doing any right now. So I am sharing my screen. I'm sorry, I'm sharing a poll everywhere poll. And I'm gonna stop presenting, go over to the poll everywhere poll. Can everybody access that? And I'm curious, how are you doing your events right now? And I will open up the poll everywhere poll. I'm asking, are you doing events online, in person, a little bit of both, or not doing any right now? And we'll give folks a few minutes to kind of answer. All right, so it looks like a tie between doing hybrid events, both online and in person, and people who are just libraries that are doing everything fully online, and then some folks that aren't doing events at this time. So I'm always curious what other groups are doing. All right, so let's talk about what Prairie State did. I'm experimenting with a new mouse and I don't know how well it's going. All right, so Prairie State College has a story that is probably familiar to a lot of you. In March 2020, the library and Prairie State go on spring break, and then we don't return for quite some time. So some necessary context. So our story is a familiar one. Prairie State College didn't return to campus for the entire school year last year. We are now back on campus in a hybrid fashion. We are at 50% capacity for the classrooms, and the library is also at 50% capacity. But we were shut down for basically the whole school year and doing work remotely. And some background on Prairie State College as well as the library, so that you know the population that we work with and kind of the structure of our library, because that's all really relevant in terms of the shutdown. So Prairie State College, two-year community college, we offer a wide variety of two-year associates, certificate programs, as well as the ability to take your gen eds and then transfer to a four-year institution and any number of other continuing education classes. We are located in Chicago Heights, it's about 30 miles southwest of the Chicago Loop in the southwest suburb, pretty close to the Indiana border. We have about 9,000 full-time students at this time. And like a lot of institutions of higher ed, we have slightly more women than we do men. And also very common with community colleges, our students skew a little older than that traditionally aged college student of 18 to 24. And then also anecdotally, a lot of our students are parents and a lot of our students work, and they don't work part-time, they work full-time. So even under under much better circumstances than a global pandemic, our students are spread thin. And so we're also in a community that is primarily African-American and Latino. And the literature tells us that these communities have been hit really hard by the pandemic in general. And then when folks got sick, they got a lot sicker, which is all a way to say that Chicago Heights and then the neighboring communities like Homewood, Flossmoor, and others that we serve were hit really hard. And our students are probably not okay. So the library is, our setup is that we have a dean. We have a dean who has the library as well as assessment and handles the online learning platform. We use D2L. We don't have a director. Our staff is composed of multiple degree librarians, which includes full-time faculty like myself, lots of different adjuncts as well. And we've traditionally had lots of support staff as well as student workers to handle the times and kind of those pockets of time when students still needed services, but we weren't necessarily all available. And our collection's pretty typical, combination of print books, lots of student study spaces, archive, computer lab, as well as any number of electronic material that students could check out. Even before the pandemic, most of our collection was available online through our website with login credentials. Now, since the pandemic began, the library staff was impacted by layoffs and some early retirements, meaning that this time last year, we were doing a lot of the same services, not all of us in person necessarily, but we were doing a lot of the same services with fewer people. So we were spread pretty thin, and we didn't have any student workers at all to fill in those staffing gaps that often exist. And our staff has since only, I guess it has grown a tiny bit. But in spite of that, we were still providing reference services through chat and text, email, phone, and we were doing our usual instruction. None of that changed last 2 semesters. We were still providing that. It was just remote instead of in a physical classroom, as well as providing programming and research support and all those other things we were doing. So what does this all mean? Well, the library as kind of a concept was pretty well positioned to go remote when the shutdown happened in March of 2020. With most of the collection being online, in theory, it should have been okay. And as far as just students being able to access things, it should have been all right. But we had this challenge where a lot of our students lacked basic equipment to be able to do their schoolwork at home, like laptops and Wi-Fi. And with so many of our students working and being essential workers, a lot of them were working even during the shutdown, say nothing after the stay-at-home order was lifted. For example, we have a large Amazon plant down here, and we all know they weren't staying at home. And even now the area remains poorly vaccinated. I checked a few days ago, so my information might be out of date, but we're at just under 50% vaccination, although now in this semester to even set foot onto campus, you have to be either vaccinated or tested and wearing a mask. So we're going remote with this situation where the librarians can in theory work at home, and in theory people can access things, but not if they don't have equipment to do so. So the library was remaining a critical part of campus even last school year, so much so that even though in theory we were all supposed to be working at home, we basically had to have a skeleton staff on campus. We had CARES funding that paid for a ton of laptops as well as hotspots for initially just students to check out, but they had to set up an appointment to do that. Later on, the program was opened up to faculty and staff who, as it turned out, also needed those. We may have had devices at home, but not necessarily enough for ourselves and our children and our spouses to all be working at home. We spent a lot of time focusing on communication on what services could and couldn't be offered and at what times. For part of the fall semester last year, before the case counts went from bad to much worse, we were doing interlibrary loan, and we were also doing, people could check out print books by putting them on hold and then check them out at a later time. But then once case counts went from bad to worse, we stopped doing even that, but we had to continue loaning out laptops. And so this sets up a situation where we have faculty librarians who are mostly working from home, and then support staff members who are in campus, and creating a bit of a disparity, but still needing to provide services to students. So I'm the outreach and engagement librarian. And what that means essentially is we're an advocate for the library. We're an advocate for the library to students and faculty, of course, but also when necessary to board members and to administration, staff members, anybody who could potentially benefit from library services. And I manage all the library's communications as well as our social media. Like all my fellow faculty librarians, I do instruction, and then I plan events. So that's kind of the many parts of my role. And last year was my first year at Prairie State College. So I started at an interesting time. And it became really apparent that with only a skeleton staff on campus, and with most of us teleworking and students not necessarily even knowing, like, is the library open? Is it closed? What even is happening? That we needed to focus on communication and find different effective ways to communicate with people. So this time last year, I had a pretty new baby at home. I'm starting a new job. So what does a reasonable person do? They write a marketing plan, because that's what you do. And so I wanted to create kind of a holistic 10,000-foot view of, well, what are our communications? Why do we do them? How do we do them? Who are we trying to reach? Why? And so I did that, and I don't know how amazing it was, but it kind of steered the rest of my decisions on how we were going to reach out to the campus community during this time. And the library has 3 social media accounts, one through Twitter, one through Instagram, and one through Facebook. And none of them get a ton of views, but they all communicate to different groups. And so we double down on our social media, making sure that we are reaching out on all 3 channels. I'm loath to admit we probably need to add TikTok in there, but I'm not ready to add another social media account into my life just yet. But really making sure that the different social medias were reaching out to those different kind of constituent groups. Historically, we had done a newsletter. I believe it was open to everyone, but we started sending it out to faculty because we knew that the faculty did a pretty good job of then communicating things to students. And so that was one way that we could communicate directly with faculty, obviously, but then indirectly communicate with students. And it's simply a newsletter that's sent out via email. It's nothing real fancy, but we try to highlight and reinforce whatever's going on in the library that way. We had a blog spot, although it had never been just for students. And while it is hosted on the blog, I have done all kinds of different communication pieces for students that come out basically monthly in the form of listicles and videos, as well as more traditional prose posts. A lot of our students are first generation, and so there's a lot of our students really struggle with how to just navigate college. And so a lot of the posts center around that. How do I ask for help? How do I set up like a workflow for my research project? What are office hours? And all of these things that might be really foreign if you don't have, if you're the first person in your family to go to college. We also do a lot of one-shots, a lot of visiting to classrooms. And so I would plug any sort of library services during that time too. And even something as basic as the hours, because since the pandemic began, our hours have changed a lot. And so I want our students to have the most up-to-date information. And then we've continued lots of events. So let's talk a little bit about those events. I wanted to think a little bit this time last year about what events should we even continue doing, what's worth doing, why do we do it? And we decided, our library team decided that we would focus on making events easier for people to attend, because one big advantage of doing things remotely is that you don't physically have to all be in the same space, but you can attend remotely. You can attend on your work break. You can attend even if you're not feeling well, and it really kind of helps with accessibility issues as well that sometimes students and, well, anyone in the community could have. So over the last, 21 months or so, there's been, I've seen and heard different lists about, well, what are our best practices? When we have these remote library events, what are they, the best practices? And so I've kind of collected different lists. And the first one's for us, for the people putting on the event. And one of the bits of advice I saw was, adapt your current programming, don't reinvent the wheel. It's a pandemic. You don't need to start something new. Now's not the time. Figure out what of your current cycle of programs can easily go online and stick with that. And don't worry about creating something new just for this environment. And be aware of your bandwidth. And I mean both your literal Wi-Fi bandwidth. If you can't run a remote event from your house's Wi-Fi, then don't try and do it. But also your metaphorical bandwidth, which there's been so many different discussions on burnout and things like that. But this kind of ties back into the first thing of not trying to start anything new. Much like if you had a physical event, you'd want to arrive early, want to log into your event a little early, but you don't have to be there too early. In our environment, we do all of our meetings on Google Meet. And if folks are getting onto the Google Meet, logged on with their Prairie State College Gmail address, you can't tell it's Gmail, but it's Gmail, then they'll go right to the meeting. But if they're not logged into their Prairie State College email address, or they are logged into a personal Gmail address or anything else, they have to be admitted as an outsider. And somebody needs to physically be there to make sure people can access the meeting. So it's a small thing, but if you get there a few minutes early, you can definitely take care of that, and it's just not a big deal. I could say from personal experience that when you're presenting, make sure you're not running any programs that will have pop-ups, because that could be really good and embarrassing if your calendar tells you you're supposed to be presenting, or if your Slack message comes up from a colleague. Not horribly embarrassing, but a little bit. Make sure your computer doesn't need to update at that time, because they're really good at picking inopportune times to update. And then always have backups of your presentation. Have it have it on Google, if you use Google Slides like I'm using, do that. And then have a PowerPoint, because sometimes Google goes down. It's not often, but if it's the day of your presentation, that's pretty lousy. And then when you're practicing as the presenter, practice with the technology involved. For example, I learned, I don't know when it was some point last year, I learned quite by accident that you can access a Google Meet anytime. So if a Google Meet is scheduled for 10:30 tomorrow and you want to practice your presentation for that, you can go there now. It doesn't matter. The time that it starts is completely immaterial. And then there were also kind of best practices in terms of how do we make sure patrons truly have access to our programs. And one was record them, and then make them available after the fact. I've personally gone to lots of webinars later on. I think it's great. Sometimes you think you have time for it and you don't, or something happens, and then you can go back and revisit it. But a big advantage of doing that too is that you can add closed captions. And you can do that a few different ways. For example, we use Camtasia, which is a video editing software, and you can train it to add closed captions based off of voice to text. You do kind of have to train the robot to do it well, but the more you correct it and the more you do it, the better it works. But I know not everybody has that. Even YouTube has automatically generated closed captions. So it's much easier to have them automatically generated and then edit them after the fact, but definitely edit them. But you're just making it more accessible to wider audiences between recording it, between adding those closed captions. And just like that pop-up did and Sam alerted us, let folks know things are going to be recorded. It's just always a nice courtesy. I think most people are fine with that, but some people might not be. And then potentially they could watch the event later on. Find multiple different ways to promote your events. Don't just rely on one way. Don't just email or just text. Blast all of the different ways. We put ours on social media and email. We haven't at this time texted students, but that is something we could do if we wanted. And then give patrons and attendees all kinds of different ways to participate and talk during the presentation and ask questions, so that so they can hop on the mic, they can ask questions in the chat. And that's not just for accessibility, that's for those things like your mic isn't working that day and you want to be able to allow people to engage multiple ways. So we had 4 different events that we continued remotely. We had 4 different events we continued remotely. And I'll get into each of those in detail in a minute. One was a book club, which was a little bit of a variation of a couple previous book clubs that the library had sponsored. We'd had read-in events before that had been always really well attended. We had an end of the semester event called Finals Fest, and then online gaming events. So these were with mixed success. So I'll talk about each of them and kind of what we did when it worked and what we're trying when it didn't. So the first is our book club. Historically, the library had done a couple different things. There had been a faculty book club that had been pretty informal and mostly surrounding pleasure reading. And I think that had the attendance numbers started to dwindle before the pandemic hit. And then, like a lot of things, it just fell apart once people were teleworking. And then there had also been, under student government, I think there had been a book club with a student-led book club with a faculty sponsor that had happened kind of sporadically throughout the years. So my original plan this time last year, in an effort to communicate with the campus as a whole, I had been reaching out to different departments that could potentially partner with the library or historically had partnered. And that included the woman who heads all of the different student groups. And so I spoke with her about wanting to get the book club going again, and if she had any students who were interested to let me know. And I waited for the fall semester, and we didn't have any student volunteers, and that's okay. They were spread thin. It was all right. So a few of us talked and decided that we would just go ahead and give the book club a try anyway. And the first meeting was in, I want to say early to mid-January of the spring semester. And it was very informal over lunch, and it was read anything book club. Just discuss what you read over winter break, essentially. And we had a handful of people come. It was all faculty, and it was fun. It was a good, short little discussion, but there weren't any students in attendance. So I wanted to see what we could do about that. So we set up 2 other book club meetings, one in February and one in April, and really focused on advertising to students in particular, although anybody who read the book, of course, was welcome. We did pick a specific book. In February, we did Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, and in April, it was Michelle Obama's Becoming. And Michelle Obama's Becoming had even been requested. So the next 2 meetings only had 2 people in attendance, of which I was 50% of the audience. There were good discussions, but the attendance numbers were pretty lackluster. So I was thinking, all right, how can we kind of rejigger this? I don't want to entirely set aside the book club, but what can we try for this current school year when we're hybrid, and see what we can do to drum up some interest? In the beginning of each semester, or it might be the school year, this is my first year actually being on campus, there is an event called Involvement Fest. And Involvement Fest is exactly what it sounds like. It is a fair that is held for students to join student government and clubs, any departments that have events. Some places are hiring too. And I wanted to get a library table at Involvement Fest to chat up library services, but also I had a form for students to opt into participating for the book club. And I did get, I want to say like 24 or 25 students who were interested, which was great. And so I reached out to them individually and kind of talked about how we wanted to have the book club go, what they were interested in reading. And so I took into consideration what students asked for when it came to reading materials, so that I wasn't just picking stuff that I want to read, which may have been part of the problem in the previous semester. And almost all the students had, anybody with a preference, a pretty consistent list. They wanted African-American authors, they wanted science fiction, they wanted fantasy. And I had highlighted the works of Octavia Butler in a previous program. And so that came to mind as a potential that fit all of those criteria. And we read Octavia Butler's Kindred. The meeting was yesterday. Attendance wasn't great, but we had a couple students there and a handful of others. And it was a really good, fun discussion. And so I think for this school year, what we'll focus on is making sure students are opting in, instead of doing multiple meetings in one semester when students are already overwhelmed just by their base to-do list. Just having something that's a little bit shorter and a little bit different is welcome. And so I think that's what we'll be trying for spring semester. And fingers crossed we'll be able to do something outside. That would be really nice. The National Association of English Teachers, I believe that's the group, hosts an event in the month of February annually. It's called the African American Read-In. And the idea is that students, particularly older students and college students, can participate in events all over the United States where they read the works of African American authors. And as you can see, this was taken several years ago, but this was an in-person event, and you can definitely tell it's February from the lovely weather outside. And the events have always been really well attended. And this seemed like something that would translate really nicely to an online event. It was something that we had done before, so it wasn't unheard of. And we already had faculty buy-in. So I got together a team of fellow faculty members. I think it was 2 English professors, 1 sociologist, and 1 historian. And we planned this event together. I don't remember when in February it was held, but it was held in February of last year. And we had, I think, just under 58 attendees, which for the middle of a week in a February online during a pandemic was really good. I was happy. And it was really great to hear, because the students themselves were the programming, to hear all the different authors and all the different, we had the types of authors you would expect, your Maya Angelou's, but then we also had, there was a biology professor who was really involved in getting our students there. So we had lots of students talking about African-American scientists. And so it was a really great way to celebrate the works of African-American authors, but also all kinds of other contributions. And the students were the programming, which was terrific. At the end of each semester, traditionally the library has had an event called Finals Fest. And the event takes place the full week of finals. And it happens both fall and spring semester. They don't tend to do it in the summer. And the event involves lots of junk food being provided for the students, as well as study spaces, tutoring, and then kind of relaxation sorts of things. Like they always have had something with animals. Here you have a very happy dog being petted by some very happy students who are hopefully a little bit more relaxed. Well, we had an opportunity to bring this event online, and mostly it went really well. We used that blog space to host an online Finals Fest. We couldn't serve actual drinks, so we had recipes for drinks. We couldn't have actual animals, so we had, I put together a playlist of hours and hours of cute animal videos. We couldn't do things like the coloring sheets, so I got a bunch of ASMRs. I did like fireplaces, which I had no idea this was a thing, but there are videos online of fireplaces for hours and hours, and they're surprisingly soothing. So we threw those up there, and then we did rain, sounds of rain and thunderstorm in the spring. So we tried to keep it kind of seasonal that way. We also had quizzes and a raffle and all kinds of other things. And we had about 100 unique attendees to the website. So we know it just wasn't me going back and revising the website. We know we actually had people come, and we had people participate in the little games and puzzles and things we put up too. So we knew that students were engaging with it. And this semester is going to be a little different again, because we have, we're here. So we're kind of figuring out what we can do in person, and then what sorts of activities we'll need to go online, and we'll do both and see how that goes as well. Something that was part of Finals Fest that was not terribly successful was a time for online gaming. At the end of the semester, historically, there have been times where times pre-scheduled for students to play board games, or here we have some novelty chess pieces that are actually right behind me. I need to get them back out, or play video games, or any number of other things that were just nice distractions from studying, or a celebration of a semester finished. For the fall semester last year, we decided that we would set aside some time in the evening for online gaming. And I don't know if it's still a popular game, but a very popular game for fall 2020 was Among Us. And it's, it was not a game I was familiar with until we did this, but it's an online cooperative game where you're little aliens on a ship and there's a saboteur and you have to find the saboteur. And it was cute. We set it up. We set up a Discord and a way that we could all play together and cooperatively. So we weren't competing against one another. We were playing together against a common saboteur. It was fun. We had a handful of people come. Unfortunately, it was all library staff and their kids. So while it was enjoyable, that was kind of beside the point. So it wound up being a little bit of a ad hoc end of library semester celebration for the staff instead of for the students. So what are you going to do? This semester, we're going to bring back the games. Now that we know that fomite transmission is not the primary way that COVID-19 is spread, I'm pretty comfortable with having the massive chess pieces back out, for example. And as big as they are, I mean, you'd have to be socially distanced to play and have puzzles and things like that. I'm far more concerned about making sure that students are socially distanced and masked rather than having those things out. So that's the game plan for this semester. So we learned a lot. Students should be able to participate in our events and not passively. Something like a lecture where the students just sit and are in the same space is maybe not enticing enough at this time. That things go better when students are able to help plan and be involved in and even be part of the event planning, like in the read-ins. And I forgot to mention, we did multiple read-ins after that. In March, we did a Women's History Month read-in where we shared women authors. That had less people than the African American read-in, but it still had like 25 students show up. And we did one with Scary Stories about a week and a half ago, and that had about 10 people come. So the more that students can be part of the programming and part of what we do, the more they show up. We should focus on maybe doing one thing a month as opposed to trying to do lots of stuff all the time. We don't have the bandwidth since, as I mentioned, we're doing the same amount of stuff with less people. So better to really thoughtfully put together one thing a month that seems to be doable rather than just doing a whole bunch of things and hoping people come. And finally, having faculty buy-in is really crucial. A big part of the reason that we had so many students arrive, particularly for the African American read-in, is that faculty told their students about it. Or the communications, several communications faculty members gave their students extra credit for speaking. And I don't care if they're there because they're getting extra credit. That's fine. They're at my event. They're participating. That's fine. So having them on your side and making sure they know what you're doing is really important to the success of our events. So at this point in time, we're at 50% capacity. It is very likely we will be at 50% capacity next semester too, although that is to be determined. I think we're going to continue doing remote events for the foreseeable future, with the exception of maybe a couple things we could do outside at the end of the spring semester of next year. It's going to be more of the same. And so I think we need to fine tune and continue to make allies across campus who can then cross promote our events. And of course, we reciprocate. I think we need to continue communicating on multiple channels with multiple different groups of people. And now that we're in person-ish, we have all kinds of opportunities to make sure we're spreading the word in person. So I'm curious what future plans you have for your library events. I am going to open up a Jamboard. I'm going to copy the link And I'm going to drop it in the chat if it will behave. It's cool. You don't have to behave. There we go. All right. Get rid of that. And do you guys know how to add to a Jamboard? You can add to it. It's kind of like an online whiteboard. There's a pen, you can add to it that way. That works really well if you have a touch screen or a stylus. I personally think it's awkward with a mouse or a finger pad. You can add to it with a sticky note. I'll add mine. More of the same. You can move that little guy, and then you can also add a text box. Oh, I wonder if it's because we're Prairie State, because it's a Prairie State thing. Rats. Okay. I wonder if it's because you are outside of the system. So I'll tell you what, I will move that there. And then let's stop sharing. And if you want to drop into the chat any future plans for library events. And then in the meantime, I realize I stopped sharing my screen entirely. I will share that and ask if anybody has any questions. What questions do you have for me? I realize I'm a little earlier than I thought I would be. And I'll put up chat too, so I can see if anybody has. Ooh, take and make crafts. That seems so fun. Leah, certainly. We can certainly do that. Somebody else says they're going to do podcasts with speakers. So I have shared these slides with Sam, and Sam, it is just fine with me if you share them with everybody who attended. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I can share it in the chat.
Great, yeah. So then you'll have access to them if you would like. Any questions for me? Stop sharing. All right, Sam, that's all I've got. However, my email is in the slides. If you have any follow-up questions, I am happy to answer. And Sam, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Valerie, for presenting. You did a wonderful job. Yeah, so we're gonna have a recording, and we'll send it out to the listserv for the people who couldn't attend. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Please let me or Valerie, follow up with Valerie or myself if you have any questions, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.